So we'll be talking about observational supersolid and spin-orbit coupled exciton polariton BEC. So looking forward to your talk.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark, for the introduction. So yes, indeed, I am Guillaume Malpuech. I'm going to present the result, in fact, of a quite large collaboration effort, which took place in the framework of a European project, the TopoLight. And then I need maybe a pointer somewhere. Yes, and this is involving two groups in Warsaw, one group in Southampton, and IBM Zurich. So I will directly, and I will detail only the very beginning of this slide, try to say what is supposed to be a supersolid. So a supersolid, from Wikipedia, it is supposed to be a specially ordered material. So from one side, it's some media with some crystalline order, where, as we heard this morning, the translational invariance is broken. But this is combined with a property which looks to be completely contradictory with this solid
Ja,
behavior,
das mache ich gerne.
which is a fluid property and even a superfluid property, which means that this crystal is supposed to be able to move and even to pass through some defect without being perturbed. Okay, so this supersolid, we are going to make it using our favorite optical structures, which are microcavities. So as explained by Dmitry this morning, in Fabry-Perot resonators, the wave vector of light along the z direction perpendicular to the mirrors, it is quantized. Then photons are still free to move in the plane. So, and the motion there is characterized by a 2D wave vector, kx, ky, and the dispersion remaining 2D dispersion, because of this quantization, turns out to be parabolic. So in fact, we have a series of quantized modes, each characterized by a 2D massive dispersion. But as said by Dmitry once again, each of these modes forms a polarization doublet. And it is quite convenient for us to describe this type of doublet using a quantum mechanical picture with two components wave functions and 2 by 2 effective Hamiltonians. Then, we don't deal just with photon, and it will be important in that talk. We can mix this photon state with electronic resonances of semiconductors, so with excitons, and this is adding new properties to these photonic modes. So polaritons are in fact interacting photons. So we are dealing with some interacting bosonic spinor quantum fluid, which can show properties such as superfluidity, which will be important here. Thermalization is also possible through the interaction between exciton and phonons. And okay, the rest of the slide I will skip. Then, and it is where there is a very strong relation in this talk with what we heard in the previous talk. It turns out that in these cavities, it is possible to have some emergent optical activity, which is nothing but a Rashba and Dresselhaus spin-orbit coupling with equal strength. So exactly the same type of effective Hamiltonians we heard about before. So this is taking place when modes of different orders, so mode of order n and modes of order n+1 are put in resonance, that there is some large birefringence in the cavity which allows to put these two modes in resonance. And on top of this, if the optical axis of the media which is filling the cavity is different of the optical axis of the cavity, which is the z-axis, then these two modes, they get coupled, and this coupling is exactly this Rashba and Dresselhaus spin-orbit coupling. So it means that the two parabola corresponding to the circularly polarized states, they are shifted in k-space, as you can see on this figure. This is something you can also see there. So these two modes, they linearly cross at k equals 0. Along the other direction in k-space, we recover parabolic dispersion. So these points are not Dirac points, but semi-Dirac points, and they are topologically trivial. And each of the two parabola, again, is circularly polarized. So from the point of view of this 2 by 2 effective Hamiltonian, this term, it will read as some Zeeman term. You see here it's this ky delta z, and this delta z is just a constant, but it is a Zeeman term, but which is proportional to one projection of the wave vector, so ky in that case. And you see that the dispersion is quite strongly modified with the appearance of two minima. Okay, so in order to organize this, the best type of structure is constituted by microcavities filled by liquid crystals, nematic liquid crystals, in which, so experimentally, they can control the orientation of these molecules by applying some external voltage. So the mode, cavity modes having a polarization perpendicular to these molecules, its energy does not depend on this voltage because the refractive index seen by the electric field, it is constant. So the modes which I will call V on this figure here, their energy does not depend on this voltage, on the rotation angle of molecules. But then the mode which has the electric field parallel to these molecules, mode which I will call H, then their energy is strongly shifting with respect to the mode V. And for instance, here you see on this point that the mode V14 and the mode H15, they are crossing. And when this crossing is taking place, this RD-SOC effect is appearing. And it was something which was demonstrated first in this science paper by our colleagues, Polish colleagues, in 2019. And these are experimental figures here. So then they can dope, and they did it in the past, they can dope these structures in order to get lasing. And if everything is organized properly, one gets lasing in these two minima of the dispersion. So there are two lasing emission emitted with two different emission angles, and they demonstrate opposite circular polarization degree. And then if one look in real space, the linear polarization, they observe linear polarization stripes, which they interpreted as exactly the spin helix we heard about before. Then here, the goal, and it was the goal of this TopoLight project, it was to go further and to realize the same type of effects, but with interacting particles, so with exciton polaritons. So in order to do this, new type of samples had to be realized. So it was, again, cavities filled with liquid crystals, but one needs to add some semiconductor material. So the material which has been chosen, it's an organic semiconductor, which is called MELPPP. I don't even know what it is, but okay, it's not important there. It's some material which is well mastered by IBM, and it allows them to realize polariton condensation at room temperature, and they published a large series of work using this material. Here you can see photoluminescence out of this type of cavity versus for different voltages. So you see that for this 20 volts, for instance, we are in the parabolic regime where the modes 14H and 14H, yes, and okay, the mode V, you cannot see it because excitation was H precisely. Then for 6 volts, you see that 15H is moving and is getting closer of 14V. And then for 3 volts, we under in this RD-SOC regime where this effective Hamiltonian is taking place. And we have on top this alpha parameter, which stands for the linear birefringence, which allows to describe not only exactly the resonant conditions, but all the other situations. You can pump optically much stronger the structure in order to go in this condensation regime. So first here it is shown in this parabolic situation where modes are parabolic when there is no RD-SOC. This is a detail, but this MELPPP material, there is a very good vibration-assisted relaxation, which allows to get gain about 200 MeV below the excitance, where we have excitant fraction of the order of 10%, and it is in this energy range that condensation was taking place. But then, okay, I'm going to skip details there. And now, one can wonder, first, from a theoretical point of view, what should happen if condensation takes place in this very peculiar dispersion with this Rajbhatt-Russell spin orbit coupling with two minima. So first, I'm going to consider the case when this alpha is equal to 0, where we have really these semi-Dirac points and modes are fully circularly polarized. So now we have, if some equilibrium condensate is taking place, it should show up in these two minima with different wave vectors. We can then write the corresponding wave functions. We have one part with a plus k0 wave vector and the other part with minus k0 wave vectors. And then if you compute the mean density for this wave function, in fact, it is constant because these two components with opposite wave vectors, they have perpendicular spins, different spins, completely orthogonal, so they don't really interfere from some point of view. So the density is constant. On the other hand, there is some linear polarization stripes because linear polarization orientation, it's nothing but the relative phase between the two circular components, and this is changing as cosine of this k0x. But you can also see that it depends on this phi1 minus phi2. These guys are the phase which is acquired by the two condensate when the condensation is taking place. So depending on this phi1 minus phi2, these stripes should position differently in the plane of the structure. Then, well, if alpha is non-zero now, there is no this linear crossing anymore. At k equals 0, modes are completely linear. Then if one moves away from k equals 0, modes becomes more and more circular because of this Erdős-Sok effect. And in the two different minima, we have elliptically polarized condensates, but with the same linear component. And this linear component with opposite wave vector, this time will really interfere, and this will give rise to some density stripes, as you can see here. With again position of these stripes, which should depend from on phi1 minus phi2. So if you realize different experiments and where if these phases are really chosen completely spontaneously, completely randomly, you should observe that these stripes can move from one experiment to another. Okay, so this is some summary of the scheme we expect. So we are going to pump some exciton reservoir. This exciton reservoir will lead to some polariton condensation in this very peculiar dispersion. These two condensates with opposite wave vector will interfere, will form these stripes with a period pi over k0, and their exact position will depend over phi1 minus phi2. Okay, then let's move to the question of the superfluidity, which is the second piece of the puzzle. So, and let's discuss superfluidity in general when Bose-Einstein condensate forms. So when Bose-Einstein condensate forms, we have many particles, but they all share the same quantum state. And it's very nice, so we can, from a theoretical point of view, describe all these particles by a single particle wave function and not by these awful many-body wave functions we heard about this morning, which are extremely hard to treat. No, here it's just single particle. But we have some interaction term, and this equation is called nonlinear Schrödinger equation or Gross-Pitayevsky equation. Then the ground state for this of this equation, it's composed by just some homogeneous distribution of particles with again the phase which can be randomly chosen. So this it is minimizing both kinetic energy and interaction energy, and if we have repulsive interactions, which is the case if we want to have a superfluid. Then we can look for elementary excitation of this condensate, taking into account this nonlinear term. And because of this nonlinear term, it turns out that plane waves, single particles in some sense, are not a good solution anymore of these nonlinear equations. And in fact, the nonlinear term couples a plane wave with plus k, with a plus sign to the plane wave with minus sign. It will lead to a peculiar shape for the dispersion of elementary excitations, which are called Bow-Coulomb, which turns out to show a linear dispersion at low k with this Cs, which is a parameter which is called the speed of sound, speed of excitation in the system. Well, we end up with this type of figure when we have here a condensate at rest, and the dispersion of elementary excitations are shown in full line, in solid line, whereas the initial dispersion, parabolic dispersion of the condensate is in dashed line, and excitation of this condensate, it's some kind of pair-like scattering process, sending one particle to positive K and positive energy, and another one to negative K and negative energy. Okay, then if one puts this condensate in motion, then if the velocity of this fluid it is lower than this speed of sound, we end up with this type of dispersion here, where you can see that there are no states at the energy of the condensate itself, which means that elastic scattering is suppressed here. So velocity cannot be dissipated, so there cannot be friction, and the motion is just metastable, and it is a superfluid. And okay, elastic scattering is recovered only when the velocity is larger than the speed of sound. So this is the mechanism of superfluidity in a Bose-Einstein condensate. And okay, polar return superfluidity was observed for polar returns in particular in 2009 by Alberto Amo and co-workers. Okay, then when we have these stripes, the situation is different, as you can understand. We don't have anymore some homogeneous condensate. Nevertheless, and without going to details, it was shown by this paper by Pitayevsky and Stringari in 2013 that still we have this gapless linear dispersion for Borgolons, and then we still preserve superfluidity despite presence of these stripes. And from our side, we have shown, okay, this polar return system, it's a little bit different. There is some pumping, there is some lifetime, it can be some non-equilibrium system. So there is some specific type of model, which I'm not going to detail, even if okay, it's still some Schrödinger-like equation, but there are extra terms with respect to those I was showing before. We have been able to show that indeed we still preserve this gapless linear dispersion for Borgolon. So this is what you can see here on these figures at the bottom. You can see this type of cross. Then if we take into account the fact that we have two spins, we have two speeds of sounds. We can even in the theory simulate the motion of a defect in the superfluid. So when you do that, of course, where is the defect? There is no superfluid anymore. So there is a hole in the superfluid density. So when you make a Fourier transform, of course, it lets some trace, which is visible here. And because it is moving, this defect, then this trace, it has a slope. And when this slope and the motion is reaching the speed of excitation, the speed of sound, then dissipation will take place and superfluidity will break down. Okay. So now let's go back to this very initial slide to say that indeed people was thinking to make such type of superfluid phase using helium, and it did not really work. And then people from Atomic Condensate, they claimed from 2017 that they made it. So there are two types of experiments. One using this spin orbit coupled condensate by the Ketterle group, as I was showing you, more or less, it is a scheme we are going to use. And there is another group of experiment where they are using atoms with dipolar interactions where some droplets takes place. So, okay, then the question is it really going to be super fluid? And okay, they made a series of Nature, Science, and so on, claiming that it is the case. And then more recently, there have been worked with polaritons. So two works, one by the group of San Vito in Lecce, and the one I am trying to present you now. Okay, okay, we'll skip details on Ketterle and atomic condensate work, and I will directly say a word about this work by San Vito. So what they did, they were considering not a microcavity, but a photonic crystal slab, in which they can realize polar return condensate in some bound state to continuum, which is a peculiar photonic state, which is above the light cone. But as explained by Antoine a bit before in his talk, there can be some interference effect, destructive interference effect for some states, which make that these states, they don't emit in the far field, so they have very long lifetime. But they did it in state with some negative mass. in which you don't really form a condensate, but rather a bright soliton. Okay, which cannot be super fluid, to be honest. But still, okay, they organized some resonant parametric scattering out of this soliton state and managed to observe some density stripes. So this stripe part, it is realized, and they didn't prove any superfluidity, which once again is in fact not possible in principle. And it was just accepted in nature. Then let's go back to our own work. So first, let me show you some condensation experiment in this parabolic regime without RDSOC. And here on this figure, what I'm showing is the result of some averaging over a large number of shots, about 500 per experiment. And okay, this is K-space image, and it is a condensate in real space, and you can observe that there are no stripes. Okay, there is quite a lot of disorder, but okay, there is some, but no regular, nothing regular. And then polarization is fully linear, as one expects. And okay, there is some, you can make interferogram demonstrated phase coherence. Then we move to the case when we have this Rajbhadre-Selao spin orbit coupling. And this time, it's maybe a little bit tiny here, but you can guess that there is something really regular which takes place. So indeed, it seems that there are some stripes here, and you can make Fourier transform of this image, and you will see that there is indeed a peak, a kind of diffraction peak, which demonstrates this periodicity. Okay, breaking of a translational invariance, and we have also this spin helix. So this is a bit surprising because it's a multi-shot experiment. So we are averaging about over many shots, and if these stripes would be placing completely randomly from one experiment for another, because this phase should be, as I was speaking before, should be completely random, we should not be able, in principle, to really see these stripes. So there is probably a little bit of pinning, probably by disorder, which take place there. So it is where we went. Okay, this I skip. We went further, and these experimental people, they managed to make single-shot experiments. And here you can see much better the stripes. And here on this figure, you see two different realizations of this single-shot experiments. And you can see, okay, we chose on purpose these two peculiar images, but you can see that they are completely in anti-phase, these stripes. So it seems that they really move from one realization to another. And then you can even, well, the position of these stripes, it is related to some, you can describe it by some phase, okay? And you can make histogram of this phase over a large number of realizations. So it was 500 realization in that case. So these histograms are shown here. And you can see that it does not seem that there is some preferred phase. It is completely random on the opposite, which means that really we have this breaking of translational symmetry, translational invariance, which is completely spontaneous. There is no preferred phase. Then we did this experiment, but by reducing the condensate density with lower interaction. And in that case, some preferred phase appear, and there should be some pinning in that situation. So in high density regime where we expect superfluidity, there is no pinning by disorder. In the low density regime, where interaction should be less important and probably superfluidity is less, there is more depletion, let's say, we have some pinning of the phase. This you can also visualize on these figures on the right, where we make some average of these spatial images. You can make an average on 1, 2, 3, 10, up to 500 images, and then you plot the contrast of the remaining of what remains of the remaining stripes, and you observe that for the two cases considering to this random phase, there is monotonous decay of this contrast, and it is decaying exactly as 1 over square root of n. What is exactly what you expect from some cosine, let's say, which will be completely placed randomly, and if you make the sum over all these cosines with random phase, then you should get this 1 over square root of n. Then if you make the same in this spin situation, indeed, you observe that the contrast after some number of averaging is stabilizing to some value. Then all this takes place in such a way independently of the presence of this disorder, which is in the sample and which is quite significant. And the fact that these stripes are completely independent of disorder is, from our point of view, a very direct proof of superfluidity. So, well, I think I am close to the end. I have still, we can also observe vortices, but this is a detail. And here, this is my last slide before conclusion. I am just showing you some numerical simulation, some movie showing the dynamics of evolution of these stripes in a disordered environment. So you can see that they really move, these stripes, that there are some phase, maybe, okay, you don't see them, but there are really some phase singularities, some vortices which appear and which then propagate. And yeah, and then you can time integrate this type of images, and you get this type of figure on the left. Then you can make it for many realizations, and it is like this that you get yes, these theoretical images which corresponds to the experimental ones, where again in the large density regime there is no preferred phase, and then when density is lower, we have some pinning, and okay, it is reducing in the same way regarding the contrast. Okay, so I am reaching the conclusion. So we managed to organize some polarity and condensate in well, spin orbit coupled. We have demonstrated some spontaneous breaking of translational invariance, making single shot experiments. We have also demonstrated superfluidity of these stripes. So these are all the features required for supersolidity. And okay, there are a lot of further study to perform, such as a detailed study of vortices and of the Kibble-Zurek mechanism, which is related to the creation of these vortices when the phase transition is taking place. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you very much for this detailed talk. Are there any direct questions?
Dima won't ask questions this time, so
No,
somebody
I will ask a question.
somebody should try to do it.
Okay.
There is a question actually in the chat.
Yeah, there's a question. So Narosha asks, she's curious about the effect of a cavity exciton detuning. Do you observe any dependence in the fringes when decreasing the detuning, for example?
Okay. Exciton, in fact, we are condensation takes place in a quite precise energy range. It's about this 200 MeV below these excitons, because it's where we have this very good Vibron assisted relaxation. So in usual, I would say, semiconductor materials, it would be some allophonon assisted relaxation. Here it's with Vibrons. So no, on a cavity exciton detuning, we don't observe anything interesting, but what we can tune is this RD-SOC. So we can change the linear birefringence, and this can, okay, maybe I can even show one slide with this. If, okay. If I can, no, I cannot change the slide anymore because I was clicking elsewhere. No, okay, it's working. So you see here, we have the wave vector splitting between this minima of the dispersion, which corresponds to the maxima of emission, versus voltage. So you see, we have when the delta k is equal 0, it's a parabolic regime, and then when we change voltage, this delta k is increasing. There is some maxima, and so on. So the period of the stripe should depend exactly on this delta k. We didn't make anything very systematic here. because the truth is that these samples, they are degrading very quickly. In fact, this MELPPP material, once you put the liquid crystal inside, they start to badly interact. And once the sample is done, you have maybe 1, 2, 3 weeks to make measurements, and then everything is just die, and you have to make another sample. So systematic measurements are hard to make.
Other questions? Yeah, Timothy.
Well, I have a question about the super solid. In fact, in the atomic community, this solid part, let's say, is strongly discussed. And apart from the fact that there is a periodic modulation and the spontaneous symmetry breaking, there is another point which is now targeted, which is the existence of something which distinguishes a solid from a fluid, the existence of phonons which are other than acoustic longitudinal modes. In a, well, I mean, in 2D lattice, for example, you can have transverse modes, but even in a 1D lattice, you can have longitudinal optical phonons. Do you think that such modes could be discovered in this particular type of experiment to prove that it's a super solid?
Yeah, I think it could be, but then, okay, the simplest way would be to be able to have not only single shot, but also single shot time resolved experiments, which, okay, some experimentalists even said that they could do it, maybe, even if it looks amazing. Then, if we cannot do that, I'm not completely sure we could really evidence such vibrations that we see very well in your simulations, actually. So in theory, I think we could study that. In experiment, if we don't have the time dynamics, it looks difficult because also of the presence of disorder and so on. I don't know what you think.
Thank you very much. I will tell you what I think later.
Okay.
Other questions? So what me also ask on, in the end, you very briefly showed vortices in these systems. What in